Mount Lassen is a national park in the state of California, about 70 miles southeast of the Mount Shasta Wilderness area. The elevation of the area that we're interested in is about 4,500 feet, which is just above the snow line. It gets very cold during the winter here. There are cabins in the area, and is one of these cabins that served as a point of origin for Billy Coleman's case. Billy Coleman, who was 14 years old on Monday, January 1st, 1940, was with his family and several of his friends, who went to stay over the New Year's weekend in their family cabin. The weekend passed without incident, but New Year's Day would be different. That afternoon, Billy was playing alone under a tree by the cabin. His mother checked on him at about 4 p.m. and confirmed that he was still there and nothing was amiss. Mere minutes later, she would check again, but this time, Billy had vanished. Alarmed, she immediately went outside and called for him, but her calls went unanswered. A search then began. The first day of searching began in a shocking find. About 250 yards away from the family cabin, on the bank of a creek, searchers found several articles of clothing that were identified as belonging to Billy. Strewn about were his overalls, underwear, and other pieces of clothing. The sheriff stated that the tracks in the area indicated that someone, presumably Billy, had been wandering around aimlessly. Spurred on by this find, the search continued. Up to 500 people searched the area for any sign of Billy. They were confident they had combed more than 12 square miles, literally every square foot of the region, but nothing was ever found. The idea that Billy would voluntarily have removed his own clothing is simply absurd. This was not an instance of paradoxical undressing. It couldn't have been. His clothing was found on the first day of the search. Next, consider the sheer scope of the search. 500 people searched for Billy. If he was still in the area, it's hard to believe that he wouldn't have been found. Lastly, you'll want to keep this case in mind when we cover the case of Austin Sparks. There are startling coincidences, if there is such a thing, between the two cases, which I shall briefly outline here. Billy and Austin were almost the same age when they disappeared. They went missing within 25 miles of each other. They went missing almost exactly 36 years apart. Both walked into the woods and were never seen again, and their parents could not explain their respective disappearances. Let's review the case's main points as discussed in the book. Billy was 14 years old when he went missing on January 1st, 1940 from Mount Lassen. At the time, he was on vacation with family and friends. He was alone outside when he suddenly vanished in just a few minutes. A search was launched immediately. His clothes were found near a creek on the first day. His removal of said clothing could not have been due to hypothermia because they were found on the first day. Over 500 people searched, but he was never found, and 500 people would have been able to find him if he was indeed in the area. Please keep these points in mind as we will be addressing each of them and determine if they are accurate statements. The sources that I use will be cited in the description below. I encourage you to check them out and do your own research and not take anything I or anyone else says at face value. Mount Lassen is indeed a national park, about 70 miles southeast of Mount Shasta. If you're wondering why that's relevant, this part of the book is supposed to center around Mount Shasta, so most measurements it will include a distance to that location. I was able to confirm on the park's website that it does get rather cold in January, a high of 40 degrees Fahrenheit and a low of 21. The park that Mount Lassen is located in is called the Lassen Volcanic National Park, so named because Mount Lassen is a volcano. The last eruption was a prolonged series of events over the course of 1914 to 1917, with the most violent part of the eruption taking place in May of 1915. The explosive eruption threw ash and debris more than 9 kilometers in the air and spread ash up to 500 kilometers away. The area would be designated as a national park just the following year in 1916. All that said, the only piece of information that seems to directly contradict what is in the book is that of elevation, which surprises me as elevation is normally heavily emphasized and considered an important factor in the disappearances of missing 411. The elevation of Mount Lassen ranges wildly, as you would expect from a volcano, but it goes from about 5,650 feet at a lake in the park to more than 10,000 feet at the peak. Given that, I'm not sure how Billy stayed in a cabin on Mount Lassen that had an elevation of 4,500 feet. Judging from a newspaper at the time, that's because he did not disappear from Mount Lassen, at least not Mount Lassen proper, and potentially not even from the national park, although I'm less clear on that point. It's reported repeatedly that he went missing near Viola, which is at the same elevation that's listed in the book, is near a creek, but is notably outside of the bounds of the park by several miles. In fairness, it does seem to be very near the Lassen National Forest, just not Mount Lassen itself, nor the national park. Billy Coleman was a 14-year-old with a passion for the outdoors. He was a capable young boy, so much so that his father said that he was well acquainted with the woods and could survive on his own for several days. He's recounted as saying that he knew what roots were edible and that he could live off those alone if he needed to. In a perhaps more hyperbolic statement, he said that it wouldn't be hard to live like Tarzan in the woods for several days. Given his penchant for the outdoors, he was no doubt excited when his mother took him and his sisters on a family outing to a cabin owned by Miss Della Kidder near Viola, California. This cabin is near the edge of Lassen National Forest, outside of Lassen Volcanic National Park. On New Year's Day, there was a fog in the heavily wooded area that surrounded the cabin due to some recent rain. At about 2 p.m., Billy informed his mother that he would be taking a walk in the general vicinity. His mother was confident enough in Billy's abilities that she agreed to let him go alone. This, however, would turn out to be a mistake, as Billy never returned from his walk in the woods. It's not clear at exactly what time Billy's mother became worried that he had not returned. From what I can piece together, the official search did not actually begin until the following day, Tuesday, the 2nd of January, although it's possible that some limited searching occurred on Monday. It was on the 2nd that searchers located Billy's overalls and underwear. They were laid out over a log, somewhat near a creek and roughly within line of sight of the Kidder home. Billy's father clarified why Billy would have taken off his clothes, stating that Billy had developed a habit wherein he would completely remove his pants and underwear whenever he used the bathroom in the woods. As for why Billy would not have put his clothing back on, searchers were able to find footprints that appeared to belong to Billy. As they tracked the footprints, it's reported that Billy's prints became excited, agitated, or confused. They seemed to indicate that he had taken off deeper into the woods and collided with a number of logs and trees in his haste. At first, searchers feared that he had fallen into the creek and drowned. There were various holes and deep parts of the creek, which would have been a serious issue for Billy had he tripped and fallen in. To account for this possibility, the creek was partially drained into an irrigation ditch, which brought the water levels low enough for searchers to see the bottom of the creek in most places. For the deeper holes and so on, searchers prodded those with rods to dislodge anything that might be inside. As the search carried on with no further results, the head searcher, a forest ranger with the Lassen National Forest, shared his theory. According to him, there's no way that Billy was still in the area, given the lengths of the search. So he believed that Billy had run away from his family. He said that it was possible that Billy had brought a spare change of clothes and left the area entirely. Family did not agree with this, believing it was outside of Billy's nature. Billy, they said, liked home too much to just leave. There were not any issues that would push him to run away on purpose. Besides, there was not any missing clothing that they were aware of. Plus, Billy's money was actually found inside of the pocket of his overalls that he had left behind. Most reports state that at the beginning of the search, there were between 100 or 200 people combing the area. Later reports state that there were up to 500 people at the height of the search if you added all the individual smaller groups together. As the search stretched on into the second week, official support started to die out, and the theory resurfaced again that Billy, perhaps, had left of his own accord. Up until this point, there had been no further developments. But near the end of the month, right when Billy's father was beginning to stop searching as well, one Mrs. W.F. Reisner of Corning, California, confidently declared that she had seen Billy on the 17th of January. Billy had reportedly shown up on her doorstep, asking to work in order to pay for food. Billy's father took the report seriously and went to see Reisner at her home to show her a photograph of Billy. She said, quote, "I am positive that Billy Coleman came to my home here on January 17th, close quote. The resulting investigation, however, did not seem to pan out, and the report was deemed as not credible by the police. This was the last substantial development in the case that I was able to locate. As far as I'm aware, Billy Coleman is still technically a missing person. If you have further information, please let me know. For now, let's take a look at Missing 411's conclusions and see if they're still valid given the information that my research revealed. Billy, who was 14 years old at the time, did go missing on January 1st, 1940, but not from Mount Lassen. It was from a home or cabin near Viola, which is outside the park's boundary and certainly not on Mount Lassen itself. At the time of his disappearance, he was with his mother and sisters. He was alone when he went missing, but it was not at all as described, nor when described. Rather than playing under a tree under the watchful gaze of his mother at 4 p.m., he went for a walk by himself at 2 p.m. Admittedly, it's possible that both statements are true, since they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Out of the dozens of articles that I read on this case, I did find one in the Oakland Tribune that does fall in line with the Missing 411 narrative of playing under a tree at 4 and his friends being on the trip with him. Even in this article, however, does not say that she looked away and minutes later he was gone. Here's the quote from that article. Quote, "His mother last saw him at about 4 p.m. New Year's Day playing under the trees near their cabin. When she looked again, it was growing dark and fog had settled over the country." Close quote. So even in that article, we do not have a timeline for how long it was between looks, nor if she immediately went out to go look for him. We do, however, get told that it was getting dark. Sunset for Viola on January 1st, 1940 would have been about 4:50 p.m. This gives us an estimated timeline of Billy's mother looking out and seeing him at 4, then not looking again for almost an hour. Again, this article is not necessarily mutually exclusive with the other articles stating that he went for a walk at 2, but all of the papers that repeat the 4 p.m. sighting are further from the actual site of the disappearance, primarily showing up in other states. I'll let you determine how much of each version you believe is true. The search did not begin immediately. It's not stated if there was some limited searching on Monday, so it's possible that that was done quickly, but reports do mention that Tuesday was when the search really officially started, so that's what I'm leaning towards. His clothes were explained by his father as being removed per Billy's habit of completely removing his pants and underwear when he used the bathroom in the woods. Even if this were not the case, stating that it's impossible that they were removed to hypothermia because they were found on the search day is incorrect. Yes, they were found on the first day of official searching, but they were not found on the first day that Billy was missing. Those are two different days. Lastly, we have a very common argument that is made countless times across missing person cases. There were so many people searching, and they were so thorough that there's simply no way that the missing person is within the search grid. This argument is flawed for the very obvious reason that it's not really possible to disprove until remains are located. In cases where the body is turned up in an area that's already searched, it's said that it couldn't have been there or that showing up there is strange. If a body is not found, then it's odd because it should have been found. In other words, it doesn't matter in the missing 411 narrative if a body is found or not. Either way, it's strange. Included in the links below, I'm going to link you to the Austin Sparks case when it's published. I've already done the research on it, so I can tell you now that I don't find them particularly similar, at least not in any way that is compelling. I think that if you listen to it, you'll find that they're very different as well. Once again, I'd like to thank my patrons over at patreon.com for their very generous support that allows me to continue making these videos. In particular, I'd like to thank those of the public recognition tier, which include the anonymous user, you know who you are, thank you, as well as Nigel B. So thank you, patrons, and thank you for watching. Until next time, take care.